Imagine moving to a foreign place in hopes of starting a new life and pursuing the American dream. You have heard so much about the opportunities that America presents, and you are ready to experience these opportunities for yourself. Yet, you encounter many struggles along the way, and you realize that the American dream does not live up to the expectations that you had set for yourself. This is what so many Americans and immigrants deal with on a daily basis. So thousands of people pursue this American dream, yet often fall short because of crushed hopes or a lack of money. And this presents the question of whether the American dream is real or not. So in my speech today, I'm going to talk about the American dream that is present in the 4 books that we have read so far in class. But before I get into those 4 books and the American dream that is present there, I think it is important to understand the definition of the American dream. So Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the American dream as a happy way of living that is thought of by Americans as something that can be achieved by anyone in the United States, especially by working hard and becoming successful. So this is a very positive outlook on the American dream. Yet, however, it fails to realize the brutal realities that many immigrants and Americans face with this. For example, particularly with immigrants, those working on minimum wage or low-skill jobs, despite so much hard work, it can be very difficult to maintain an economically stable lifestyle and to live a happy way of life that this definition of the American dream presents. However, Alfred Hornung wrote in 1999 about the un-American dream, which is a different outlook than what Merriam-Webster Dictionary presents. He says that the American dream can be viewed as more idealistic rather than materialistic. And this is because of what I mentioned earlier. For many people, the American dream does not mean living an economically stable lifestyle. It means pursuing the ideals that America values so much and living those out in one's life. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Book of Un-Americans by Cristina Henriquez. And we start off by seeing the Rivera family moving from Mexico to the United States with the intention of giving Maribel a better opportunity for schooling. Her brain injury did not present stable opportunities in Mexico. So they put all their hopes into moving to the United States. And we see Alma in particular had very high hopes for this transition. She says, "We had all our dreams pinned on this place, but the pin was thin and delicate, and it was too soon to tell whether it was going to hold anything at all." So the Riveras put all their faith into coming to the United States, and they believed that this opportunity for Maribel was worth the sacrifice of moving from Mexico. However, it was a very brutal transition for them as cultural and linguistic barriers presented constant struggles in their life. Arturo, on the other hand, felt that he achieved the American dream despite his death. We see in the last excerpt of the book that he says, "One day when we go back to Mexico and people ask me what it was like here, I will tell them all those things. I will tell them all the ways I love this country." So this is the last sentence of the book, and it is very tragic because we see that he is clearly content in his move to the United States, and he believes that it was worth the opportunity. However, all these dreams and realizations that he has come to a sudden halt because of his death. And so with this, Arturo is more focusing on the idealistic view that Alfred Hornung had presented earlier. He believes that the values that his family learned in coming to the United States were worth it. He was not focused on the material goods as many people are, rather the values and ideals that he sought after. The second book I'll talk about also deals with immigrants, My Antonia by Willa Cather. And the first person I'll talk about in that book is Lena Lingard. She is a classic example of somebody who went from rags to riches. She was a very poor young girl, yet she worked her way up in the business world and became a very successful woman with her dressmaking business. Jim comments on her apparent success and says he describes her as being smooth and sunny and well cared for. Yet a sentence later, he remembers how she was when she was a poor girl. She was poverty-stricken, yet she worked hard in her life and became a very successful businesswoman. Lena here epitomizes the American dream because she worked hard, and Cather describes her as moving towards a happy life in her business world. On the contrary, Mr. Shimerda does not have the success that Lena Lingard had. He ended up killing himself because of such the harsh transition that he was faced with. He dealt with a harsh winter, little food, no money, and amongst these struggles, the American dream became lost. He was no longer able to focus on the positive side of things, but rather all of these negative effects seemed to weigh on him, and it was very difficult for him to see the bright side of what was to come. The third book that I'll talk about is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. And this deals with the American dream that is present more in a typical family of the United States. And in particular, I will be looking at Douglas and Tom. So Douglas comments many times on the wonders of the world. And while his example that I'm going to talk about does not necessarily represent hard work, it does represent him living a happy life and coming to terms with himself. So Bradbury mentions all the things that Douglas notices about the world, such as the flowers, birds, and his breath. Douglas realizes that he is alive, and in this moment he is taking in all the simple pleasures that nature has to offer him. He is living a happy life and is not worried about the material possessions that could hold him back. Tom, on the other hand, comes to a different realization. He says, he realized that all men were like this, that each person was to himself one alone, one oneness, a unit in society, but always afraid, like here, standing. So Tom realizes that not everything is fun and games anymore. He realizes that there are true fears and doubts that people experience on a daily basis. And he comes to terms with this in himself as he is looking for Douglas when they think he is lost. And this example of Tom can be seen as a metaphor for the American dream. As a person becomes more acclimated to their lifestyle, such as Tom is realizing his place in the world, and these struggles and brutal realities that the world has to offer can become more apparent in a person. And this is a view of the American dream that we can see through Tom. And finally, the last book that I will talk about is After This by Alice McDermott. And this also focuses on the American dream that is present within a typical family of the United States. And the Keens is the example that After This presents. The Keens dealt with several struggles, particularly with Mary and John Keen's children. Mary and John had set very high expectations for their children, yet they were leading different lives than what had been set out for them. Claire and Jacob in particular. Claire clearly disrupts the family's values by becoming pregnant in high school, and this creates a great disruption in their family. Right after Claire told her mother that she was pregnant, we see this quote from Alice McDermott. It says, "Her mother slapped her and then burst into tears, and Claire's pain and astonishment were so great she could barely catch her breath. She said, 'A grandchild for you,' but even she knew how ridiculous this was. Something out of the illogic of a long dream." So Claire is clearly crushed by her mother's reaction. And Mary, in this quote, very clearly wants a perfect family. She wants to epitomize the American dream, yet Claire creates a barrier in this vision by becoming pregnant. Mary no longer sees this as a perfect family that she had wanted, and it becomes a great struggle for the Keene family. Jacob's death presents another barrier in the vision. There is great sadness in his death, yet, however, the last thoughts that we see Jacob describe are about the wonder of the world, just as Douglas had also noticed. Jacob is seen looking out a window of an airplane, and he remarks on the beauty of the nature. He saw great happiness despite his obvious and coming death for him. And this again discusses more the idealistic view of the American dream. The beauty and wonder struck him, and he did not have material possessions that needed to bring him happiness. So in conclusion, we can see that the American dream is present in all of these books, whether failed or successful examples. Everyone wants success, but this can be very hard for immigrants as minimum wage and low-skilled jobs present a barrier in living an economically stable lifestyle. So with this, it is hard to say whether the American dream is real or not, as there are several successful but also several failed examples of this. But it all depends on a person's outlook. If a person believes that they are working hard and striving after values, then they can see themselves as pursuing the American dream. However, I think that we could all agree that the value of hard work and determination is irreplaceable. And if somebody has these values instilled in themselves, it will be very difficult to fail in the end. Thank you very much.